Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to another episode of r/EntitledPeople, where you come to hear ridiculous stories about people who believe the world truly revolves around them and that nobody else matters. Guys, before we dive into the stories today, though, I gotta show you this. So this one person asked, driving incompatibility. Is it enough to break up? Okay, so this isn't my question, but my friend hasn't been approved to post here yet and asked me to post. So, my boyfriend and I have been together for 3 years now, and we have a very loving and stable relationship. We don't live together, and live about a 25-minute drive away from each other. Now, the main issue is, I don't drive. Now, I don't plan on getting my license or learning because, quite frankly, it scares me a lot, and I'm just too anxious to be on the road. Now, when I first met my boyfriend, he would give me rides all the time. He would pick me up and drop me off and take me to places I needed to go. When we first met, I had not done lessons yet, but still felt a bit apprehensive. He did try to teach me and was very patient, but I was just too anxious, and it was then that I decided that driving wasn't for me. So lately, he seems tired of giving me rides. He will sometimes, but he's also been saying that I should use other methods of transportation, and that he can't be picking me up and dropping me off all the time. We'd also been talking about taking a road trip in the summer, but he seems less excited by it when I pressed. He said it was because he would be the one doing the driving and it would be so exhausting. Now, I was hurt. He knows how much I wanted to go on the road trip and had been looking forward to it. And listen, it's not like I wouldn't have pitched in for gas or helped him navigate. I feel like I'll ultimately need a partner who's willing to give me rides and be understanding of my decision not to drive. Is it worth breaking up over? Am I being too picky? Okay guys, so this is super entitled. So first of all, who actually believes that this girl is asking for a friend? Nobody, right? Because it's such an absurd question to ask. So basically she wants to throw away a 3-year relationship. Frickin' 3 years because her boyfriend has gotten sick of driving her around everywhere she needs to go. Seriously, what does she expect people to say? Yeah, break up with him because you're too good for bus or Uber. Like, is she gonna keep hopping guys until she finds that one person who's always gonna take her everywhere she needs to go, anytime she needs to go? So guys, tell me what you think this girl should do. I would love to read people's opinions on this. With that said, guys, fasten your seatbelts because things are about to get insanely entitled. I hope you enjoyed the stories today, and do hit that subscribe button for future tales. So, when my little brother was in Boy Scouts, he had this best friend named Max. Max was cool, but his parents were horrid. They were racist, they're ignorant, they're entitled, and sadly, they also ran the Boy Scouts. So one day, the Boy Scouts have an outing. We went to the local native reserve. I often tagged along since my mom and the parents are friends. On that day, the natives were holding a really fun drum circle and coming-of-age ceremony. If some of you have never gone, it's basically this. People are singing, banging drums, big fire. All in all, it's a really good time. The natives start by doing the coming-of-age ceremony. So at this ceremony, the people coming of age are given chewing tobacco. Immediately, the parents start yelling about how it was disgusting and young people should not be given chewing tobacco. Next, the natives start singing and dancing. It's a beautiful dance, but the mom does not think so. Karen starts screaming that the dancing was too savage, terrifying, and ungodly. So Karen gets up. She actually walks through the circle up to the chief. Now, she's stopped by a nice young man who asked her to sit down. She ignores him and narrows her eyes at the chief and says, "You need to stop all this." Waving her hands and saying, "It's scaring my kid. You're traumatizing him. This is inappropriate for kids. Take off that silly costume." Now, in my head, I'm thinking, Karen, you are the one who brought 20 kids here. They did not invite you. Also, I'm sitting next to my younger brother and Max. They're both enjoying themselves and talking about Egyptian pyramids. The chief rolls his eyes and says nothing. The nice young man asked her again to sit down. Karen starts to scream again, but notices the many disapproving eyes on her, as it's not only the Boy Scouts visiting the event, but lots of the local community. She walks back and sits down steaming. The Boy Scouts never went back, and in a couple of years, the parents were kicked out of the Boy Scouts for emotionally abusing the Scouts. Guys, it just sucks so much that the ceremony was interrupted and pretty much ruined by one entitled person. So, the story reminds me of one I did a few weeks back where Karen goes to a Japanese festival and hates on people who aren't Japanese for wearing kimonos. I'll link the story right here if you've missed it. Like, you can't just attend certain things that aren't a part of your culture and expect them to cater to you. And people have their own way of doing things, and it's not anybody's place to tell them that they're horrible. Like, way to be a great role model for those Scouts, Karen. Like seriously, 10 out of 10, you deserve it. Well, I had a heck of a weekend that should have been nice and relaxing. To start, I went to visit my parents this weekend. My parents live in a fairly expensive and safe public neighborhood that they retired to after a long career life. The community itself is really well off. There's a nice private school, a few community pools, a few trails in the same area. It's really nice. The average homes around here are $1.5 million, but because it's a public community, meaning there's no gate to enter, it picks up crime every few years. And lately, there have been a lot of break-ins. Now, when there's crime in a normally safe area, this can put some people on edge. Some people report everything. My mom gets reported for walking the family dog at 7 p.m. on the same loop she does every day at the same time for the past 5 years. Now, a little bit on me. I'm 6 foot tall, I have a big beard, bald head. I'm a moderately built guy and tend to wear button-down shirts when I'm not working. So where my story begins is just outside my parents' place. Since it's a public community, all the streets are public as well. Now, it's not illegal to park here if you aren't a resident. It's just out of the way of stores and stuff, so there isn't really a reason anyone who isn't visiting or living here to park here. I have a brand new Chevy Colorado ZR2, which is a truck. I parked it literally outside my parents' house and visible from their living room window, which is where we were sitting and talking. I'd say about 45 minutes later, a tow truck pulls up and starts to hook up to my truck. I ran outside yelling obscenities to the tow truck guy, and he says they had a call about an illegally parked vehicle. After explaining that it's a public area and it's by no means illegal to park here, I asked for the contact info of the reporting individual. I didn't get much, just the first name, Karen, for the sake of the story. I asked my parents and they gave a fair-sized frown like they already knew it had to be her. My parents had new neighbors that moved across the street a few months back, and I'll save some of their stories for another time. I'd rather not get too sidetracked. So I walk to the house, see various toys and such all over the front side of the house. It is a bit messy, but I was a mess as a kid too. I knock on the door and there was no answer. I then ring the buzzer, which is one of those Ring cameras. I then hear a bit of yelling at her kids to stop running around. Now I know she's home, so I just kept ringing the door. As I'm waiting, I notice that she has multiple cameras on me, which is important for later. She finally answers the door and she says, "What do you want?" in a rude tone. Now I talked to her in a calm voice because she seemed a bit annoyed already, and I said, "Why did you call a tow truck on my vehicle?" Karen says, "You shouldn't be parking there. I've never seen you before. It's illegal to park here if you're not a resident. We don't need convicts around here looking for homes to case." I said to her, "Convicts? What the heck? Why would you think that? This is a public street. I can legally park here anytime I wish. I'm visiting my parents and have the right to park here without being towed, thank you very much. Now leave my truck alone." So I then walked away. Not 10 minutes later, I look out the window to see 2 boys, maybe 10 years old, egging my truck. I ran outside, screaming at them while they took off. I then grabbed my hose and sprayed the truck down, and thank God for a thick wax coat. And guess which house those 2 boys ran to? Now, I decided to leave it be. I'm leaving in 30 minutes anyway. 15 minutes later, a police officer walks in front of our door and rings the doorbell. I open the door and talk with the officer. The officer asked me, "Is that your truck?" I told him, "Yes, officer, it is." He says, "We received a report that the owner of the truck was driving recklessly in the neighborhood and almost ran over 2 kids. We were told he yelled at the kids and proceeded to hose them down with a strong water hose." I told him, "Officer, that's one heck of a story. Would you be interested in coming into my parents' home and we'll pull up the camera footage while I explain my side of the story?" The officer accepted and we entered the house. So while we viewed my parents' cameras, I explained the sequence leading up to the current. I explained the full conversation I had with Karen, including her insinuating that I was a convict and that I partially made a threat. I apologized that I should have caught myself sooner. I also mentioned multiple cameras that Karen has at her door. The officer thanks me for my time, and he says, "So I may be back a bit later. I have to talk with your neighbor." 20 minutes and a bit of yelling in the background later. The officer comes back and says, "So I've talked with the neighbor about her and her kids' actions. Would you be interested in pressing charges for the destruction of property?" I told him, "No, officer, they're just kids, likely doing what Karen told them to do. Were you able to check her cameras?" The officer says, "All right. No, she denied access. She shouldn't be bothering you again, but if she does, please don't hesitate to call the non-emergency line and ask for myself directly." I left not long after. So far, there haven't been any retaliations against my parents. Now, I'm actually surprised the police didn't charge her with calling in a false complaint. What a nightmare neighbor though. And I definitely would have pressed charges, especially if my cameras caught the kids egging my car. Besides an encounter 30 years ago with a mom who thought the sun shined out of her kid's ass, I hadn't experienced any of these crazy people. That changed about 2 hours ago. So some important information and relevant backstory first. About 18 months ago, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. It wasn't long before I had to have surgery to remove the tumor. It was an 18-hour surgery. They removed about a foot of my large colon and 18 lymph nodes. I woke up in the ICU. When I finally looked down, I had a long scar running down the center of my body. It starts just below my chest and runs past my belly button to just above my you-know-what. I also have a reversible colostomy. It's important to understand that I have what's called an appliance stuck to the side of my torso which collects my poop. I have to then empty the bag instead of pooping. I also have to change the whole appliance every 4 days. I will soon be able to have my colon put back together and no longer deal with this kind of thing. Anyway, this morning I was at one of those large office buildings next to the hospital. I was waiting to see my surgeon to discuss when he was going to reconnect my colon. This place has one of those enormous waiting rooms for multiple doctors. Now I know this is going to be a long wait as my surgeon is very much in demand, so I brought my Nintendo Switch. I was sitting down playing my game for a few minutes when a dad and his kid sat near me, and I hear the kid say, "Wow, Dad, look, that guy has a Nintendo Switch." The dad then says, "Yeah, I see." Now I'm a very outgoing person and I love to talk, so I asked the father if he'd like me to show his son. Now the father at this point seems completely normal, and he says, "Yeah, no problem." The kid looked to be around 10 or 11, and I'm in my mid-30s, but I've been a lifelong gamer. I also have 7 nieces and nephews, so I play games with the kids his age all the time. I placed the Switch on the side of the table near us and handed the kid one of the Joy-Cons. We played a couple of races before he asked what else I had. I then bring out Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and the kid was jumping up and down. We played Super Smash Bros. For nearly an hour before I heard my name called. I raised my hand and said, "Here." So the nurse saw me and I quickly grabbed my Joy-Cons from his hands and packed the Switch away in my backpack and began to walk towards the nurse. At this point, I feel someone tap on my shoulder. The dad says, "Hey man, can you let my son play with your Switch while you're with the doctor?" Now I tell the dad, "Sorry man, I had a blast playing with him, but who knows if you'll be here when I get back." The dad then says, "So? You're a goddamn adult, why do you need it anyway?" Now at this I was astounded. The dad had just done a complete 180 on me, so I turned to follow the nurse who was holding the door open for me. Now it is important to note that during the hour I was playing with the kid, my appliance became active and started filling. At this point, it was more than half full. Now I'm wearing a t-shirt, so you can see the outline of it when this happens. And just to give you context, a few weeks ago, a police officer thought that I was carrying a gun under my shirt because of this. So it looks like there's something large in my front pocket. So the dad then says, "Dude, just give him the Switch. You don't need video games. You need to go outside and do some running." The nurse finally says, "Sir, please leave the man alone." Now I do appreciate that attempt, but it sounded rather weak. This guy was about 6'4" and looked like a weightlifter, so I guess he was used to intimidating other people. And as he alluded to, I am a large guy. I'm about 6'2" and I am overweight, so I am used to not being intimidated. I respond to him and say, "That's not gonna happen." So he decided to make it physical. I was only half facing him, so he grabs my shoulder, spun me around to face him, and with his other hand, started trying to get under my shirt. He's yelling, "Hand it over, you don't need it, you need to run." Now he finally gets a hold of my appliance and pulls back as hard as he can. I don't know how he thought it was a game because it's soft and it's warm. Now I screamed in pain because the adhesives that hold this thing on are strong. He actually managed to rip some of my skin off. The bag is perfectly sealed while it's attached to me, but as he pulled it towards himself, a bunch of poop comes flying out all over his shirt, pants, and shoes. Now, when he realized what it was, he began to run away. I got a bit on my shirt, but the bleeding was more of a problem. The nurse led me quickly to the back room, and I had my surgeon in the room in a matter of seconds, making sure I was okay. I keep a spare appliance in my bag, so I was back in business in no time. I washed my shirt, and only a small part got onto it, and it was easy to clean with soap and water. It got me home at least. So I later found out that the man stopped and just stood there for a while stunned. The front desk people were laughing as they told me this. They said he seemed completely shocked that it wasn't a game. Apparently he dropped the appliance and yelled for his son to try to leave. Security caught up to him pretty quick and he was arrested. I'll have to go and make a statement tomorrow. Guys, all I can say is wow, great job parenting, sir. You decided to steal a Nintendo Switch from someone and insulted them in front of your son. Not to mention causing a scene in a waiting room full of people and then getting arrested. Can anybody give this man a Dad of the Year award because he's amazing? Now OP does have an update to the story and it reads, "I just came from giving my official statement. I am typing this in my car. I was expecting to see a police officer this morning, and I got a call over an hour ago from a lawyer from the prosecutor's office. She asked me to come to her office instead, so I went to her office. Apparently the dad was arrested and he was released. I also caused a bit of an argument in the prosecutor's office. Two of the lawyers were arguing whether grabbing my bag was assault or theft. One was arguing it was part of my body, while the other argued that it was my property. When I arrived, the woman explained that for a moment, he was only charged with a misdemeanor. However, once they settle the issue, they will be adding further charges. I wasn't told any of this until I gave my statement. She told me the chances of him going to trial is slim, so I probably won't have to testify. Oh, and I had no say in whether he was prosecuted. He was being prosecuted whether or not I gave a statement because of all the witnesses. Now, my mother is one of the most entitled women I know. We grew up in a household that didn't believe in going to doctors or going to the hospital, and this translated in an irrational fear of hospitals for my mom. At the time of the story, I was 14 years old. I was in high school, and I was about to have a very bad day. Now, I should start off by saying that my mom lives exactly 1 mile away from the closest emergency room. Also, my siblings and father were out of town that weekend, and I didn't feel like going, so I stayed home. So I get home from school on a Friday around 4 p.m. and call my mom to tell her that I don't feel good and that I need to see a doctor. My mom says she has an hour workout with her personal trainer, who happens to train the whole family for our sports teams. My mom tells me she'll come home right away and take me to the pediatrician after she's done. At 4:40, I call my mom saying that something is seriously wrong with me and I really think I need to go to the hospital. She tells me that the personal trainer just had a cancellation and that she's staying for another hour to work out, and then she'll take me to the doctor. At 5:10 p.m., I call my mom and beg her to come home because I'm in a lot of pain and I feel terrible. She gives the phone to the personal trainer, who says, and I kid you not, "So it sounds like a muscle cramp from our workout last week. You'll be fine, buddy." She then says she'll call our friendly neighbor across the street to check on me. About 10 minutes later, I hear friendly neighbor walk through our door and come into my room to check on me. I'm on the floor because I fell after going to the bathroom and I couldn't get up. She helps me to the bed and immediately calls my mom. The conversation goes something like this. Friendly neighbor says, "Hey, I think you need to get here ASAP. Your son is white as a sheet and is sweating bullets. Also, he's in so much pain that he can barely move." My mom says, "Oh, I'm sure he's fine, probably overreacting from a muscle cramp." The friendly neighbor tells her that this isn't a muscle cramp. I think he needs to see a doctor. I can put him in my car and meet you at the hospital. That's 1 mile away. My mom says, "No, don't do that. I know what's best for my son. I'll finish up here and head home and then take him to the doctor. Don't take him anywhere." So at 5:45, the friendly neighbor calls my mom again, and my mom says she's changing and then she'll be home in 10 minutes, as the gym is pretty close. At 6:20 p.m., she finally gets home. Neighbor tells her what I've been going through, and she says I need to go to the ER. Again, my mom says she knows what's best, and she says she's taking me to see our pediatrician. Now, my mom does take me to see our pediatrician, who also runs a pediatric ER. The problem is that the doctor's office is 25 minutes drive away with zero traffic, and we're at the end of rush hour. So about 7:15ish, we get to the pediatric ER, and they immediately take me back to see what's wrong. It turns out that I have acute appendicitis, and it's close to bursting, so they need to send me to the hospital that's 1 mile away from my house to get it removed. The entire time, my mom is murmuring about this being an inconvenience, and how she needs to get ready for a trial the next day, as she's a divorce lawyer. She tells me I'll be fine, and just need to sleep it off. Then there comes a moment when my mom is out of the room, and I have the doctor and the nurse in the room alone with me. I tell them the whole story of how I've been trying to get her to take me to the ER since 4 o'clock, how we live only a mile away from the hospital, but my mom didn't want to go here because she hates hospitals. So I managed to convince them to call for an ambulance to transport me to the hospital to make sure I got there. After my surgery, the nurse told me that my appendix had burst as they began the surgery, so they had to be quick. To this day, I still tease the personal trainer every time I see him by grabbing my side and saying that I think I have a muscle cramp, and I've never heard him use those words together since. I can't imagine what would have happened to OP if her mom had him sleep it off. So my friend had his appendix burst and he literally almost died, so that was a very, very serious thing that might have happened. Guys, so this is actually super terrifying. I wonder how many people end up in the hospitals with severe complications because they don't trust doctors or hospitals. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our entitled people. Guys, we survived another one, and boy, were the stories absolutely crazy. If you enjoyed the stories today and you missed my last episode, I will link it right here. OP's coworker thinks she's absolutely invincible and uses it as an excuse to torment OP. And OP fights back, and she gets absolutely destroyed. The girl gets absolutely destroyed. Check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.